mean, I'm a Buckeye fan watching that game, and I just feel so bad for them. Their defense looks terrible. I think they allowed like over 300 plus rushing yards to them. They can't even stop a fullback from running like 50 yards.
Yeah.
I'm like speechless.
I know I'm rubbing my head because I got a headache. Plus, I was watching Michigan play for about a half tonight, and you know as well as I know, sure, Michigan's not been an elite team. They've not reached expectations, but they have been good under Harbaugh up until this season. They've been good. They've been top 15 good. And now it just seems like all the life, all the will, all the fight, all the fire is out of him. And therefore, if it's out of him, it's going to be out of the team and out of the program. And it just seems like they are, I don't want to call them a bunch of quitters because they're out there trying, or I'm guessing most of them are. It appears as though they're still trying, but they are a deflated, demoralized team. I think every other team in the Big Ten probably, if you put them on the field with Michigan, would at least show, even Illinois, even Rutgers would show more fight, more desire, more energy. They're just a defeated team.
Hey, I think they either miss on their Pickwick, I don't know if they pay. What do you call it, payday? They missed it, and I guess they missed the international trips to go in the summer to Harbaugh.
I'm having trouble hearing some of that, but
sorry.
No, that's okay. I just
the alignment trying to help stop the run game, and they missed the usual international trips in the summer. Didn't happen due to COVID and the limited practice. I don't know what's going on. They lost to, well, they beat Minnesota. They lost to Michigan State. They can't stop the pass attack. Now they can't stop Wisconsin's run game when their pass attack was straight against Illinois. I don't know. Do you think Don Brown? I don't know about Don Brown. I mean, we torched them with drag rounds all day, scoring 50-plus points in the WB game. But no, now Wisconsin, any team can just lift this team up. And Indiana, I don't know. The Indiana Michigan State game, it was a good first half of the game. I don't know what happened to Indiana in the second half. They missed like a field goal, I think, or two, I don't know. And then they failed to convert like 4 downs in the red zone. Is that like a concern for Indiana? Is that concerning heading to Ohio State, those middle hitters?
Well, the game was out of hand at that point. But I do think that they're still trying to execute, and so it's alarming. Yeah, I think there's some concern there because it wasn't like they were trying to shut down and not score. Indiana's a flawed football team. They're not a great football team. They're a good football team. I don't think they're in Ohio State's league. I'm going to have to see it to believe it. But all that game did was, to me, underline Michigan's issues, because I see Michigan State leave the big house after they scored 27 points and beat Michigan, and then go and get blasted by 6 touchdowns to Iowa, and then get shut out by Indiana. So it's crazy.
Well, hopefully here for the Big Ten, like the West is competitive. So far, I think Northwestern will be leading right now, going into next week. And the Big Ten West.
Yes, Northwestern's 4-0, Wisconsin's 2-0.
Well, I just have to say, Mark, I think Jim Harbaugh is coaching on borrowed time. He better brush up that resume. What do you think?
Well, he's not necessarily going to have to hurry back to get to any kind of employment status. I don't think he's necessarily in my situation, and he's got to work anytime soon. I think he's in pretty good shape there. He may want to brush up that NFL resume, because as I was texting back to a number of friends that were dogging him, he's got, I don't know if I was having this conversation with you or with somebody else, where I pointed out he had one of the 4 best winning percentages in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, he did that over a short period of time. He had Trent Baalke that was, picking the players, who was his general manager,
Sure.
and he did a really good job there. So it's a little bit of a different structure. I think what helps in the NFL is if you get with the right organization, owner, general manager, and that type of situation. I got to say that as a Cleveland Browns fan, I've bared witness to that for the last 20 years of not having the right people picking the players. So, yeah, I think he benefited from that. I must say, when he went back to college, when he went there, as I said to you before, Mark, I really thought he could have recruited a quarterback by now. And maybe Joe Milton had some possibilities. I've been open-minded to him maybe being a really good quarterback, but I just always thought that he could have scored at that position. He could have built a coaching staff, and he could have found the guy that recruited Andrew Luck could have found a really good college quarterback by now. But he hasn't been able to. Does that still blow you away, Mark? Have you not been able to?
Well, I thought that this guy would be possibly the first one. Sure. Yeah, he's relied on transfers, and he's had a couple fringe NFL players at the beginning of his stay at Michigan. Unfortunately for him, he probably had his worst quarterback in Michigan actually quarterback his best team when Wilton Spate was there in 2016. And then, of course, Brandon Peters was a 4-star recruit. He turned out to be a marginal MAC-level Illinois quarterback. And now we've got Shea Patterson and Joe Milton. So I don't know if he can't recruit quarterbacks or he can't develop quarterbacks. But one or the other, it's just not happening.
Well, that goes back to the Steve Gates point about they can't develop their players up there. And I think that's what we were talking about the other night. Because his recruiting classes are pretty good. I mean, if you're getting top 10 recruiting classes and not getting a top 10 team out of it, then that says something about your player development, just bottom line. And like I told you the other night, his inability to put together a really good coaching staff is totally on him. To not find, let's say, and when they didn't let go of Don Brown, here was the thing. When they lost to Ohio State 62-39 in 2018, what I was saying is when they lost to Ohio State in 2018, 62-39, and they figured, you know what, let's go get an offensive coach because that's our problem. You know what I'm saying? Maybe they needed to fix a defense that was giving up 62 points instead of looking at an offensive coach. That's what I'm saying. Get my point?
I get your point if we're going to be hyper-focused on one game, and I know that's the game, but still, Don Brown was fielding top 5 defenses in the country.
Okay. And you know what, though, Mark? In every big game, when the stats bear it out, they keep on giving up 40, 50, 60 points.
Not to anybody not named Ohio State.
Okay. How did they do tonight? How did they do against Alabama in the bowl game? How did they do against Florida in the bowl game that they lost after Ohio State in 2018? I guarantee you in those games they were giving up in the high 30s, low 40s.
Sure. Okay, so Alabama scored 35 points. One of the touchdowns was scored with like 8 seconds left in the game. So I'm not going to go nuts about that. So they were competitive in that game. It was a game into the fourth quarter. The Florida Bowl game, I don't know. They beat Florida less than a year before that, and they beat them prior to that. Now, in that particular game, they were missing a lot of players. A lot of players opted out of that game. I'm not defending Jim Harbaugh across the board. I'm just saying that he is not succeeding at what he has been hired to do, and that's win championships. There's no debating that. And now it's gotten to a point where I don't know how good they are. They're pretty awful. I think we've seen 4 games, and they played good against what has proven to be a really bad opponent. And now they've played 3 awful games against good to very marginal teams. So the one thing I'll say about the recruiting rankings, I don't think his teams have underachieved much from the recruiting rankings.
Well, but he's been consistently top 10 recruiting rankings, but he's not been consistently top 10 final rankings, Mark.
No, he's not in the top 10, but he's right in that area. He's in the 15 range.
Okay. I mean, I would think that he has. I don't know. I would think that he could at least win a couple of those bowl games that he should have lost. If he's losing to some other Big Ten teams other than Ohio State that he shouldn't be losing to. Obviously, this year is proof positive of that. So I don't think he's getting much bang for his buck out of his recruiting classes from where they're at right now. Please tell me where I'm going wrong with that assessment.
I'm just saying that Jim Harbaugh was hired at Michigan to win championships. He is not doing that. He's failing. But if we're looking at up through 2019, take away this season is either an aberration or this season is the beginning and the end, and they've gone from underachieving to awful, and he'll be gone, or he'll be going 5-7 in the Big Ten for the next 3 years, because what they're doing right now is obviously not even to the standard that he's had for 5 years there. But I will say that if you look at the recruiting rankings, I don't have them in front of me, but from the top of my head, yeah, they've generally been in the 8 to 12 to 13 range in the recruiting rankings. And they've been roughly 5 spots behind that in terms of where they've been ranked, where I believe they are. And I don't always believe in the rankings, as you well know. So my estimation of how good a team is, especially if they're playing in the second best conference in America, then I think their final ranking is actually skewed. But, they played a team in a bowl game last year that was better than a team that played in the college football playoff. That was a pretty bad matchup for them. They were playing like the 4th best team in the country. And again, I'm not defending. I'm just saying that they have been, by the measure of any program outside of the ones we could obviously name, about 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, something in that range, the elites plus Notre Dame and a couple more, he's pretty much outcoached and outperformed everybody else in the country.
One question for you, Mark. One question for you. And I agree about talent advantage. And you know what? I've started to follow recruiting rankings a little bit more since Urban Meyer became the coach at Ohio State. I follow recruiting rankings a little bit more during the Tressel years. But I have to ask you this question.
Yep. And
I do think that recruiting rankings and final rankings usually do match up.
Yep.
So what's the biggest rivalry in the SEC?
In the SEC?
Yes.
I would say either Alabama LSU or Alabama Auburn.
Okay. I would say it's the Iron Bowl, Alabama and Auburn.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. Okay.
And maybe you know where I'm going with this.
Maybe.
I would ask you this question.
Yep.
I would ask you this question. Does Nick Saban have a talent advantage over Gus Malzahn?
Yes.
And what's Gus Malzahn's record against Nick Saban?
3-4.
Okay, that's not great, but still.
Oh, it's good. It's better than anybody else.
Right.
Okay. Right. Gus Malzahn, this might surprise some people, though, but Gus Malzahn's records at Auburn, aside from going to a national championship game, which is obviously very significant in his first year, but since Jim Harbaugh's been at Michigan, Gus Malzahn doesn't have as good a record as Jim Harbaugh does.
Right. But what I'm saying to you is he's been able to beat his rival with a talent disadvantage that's not as big a gap as. I mean, what's the gap between Auburn's recruiting and Alabama's recruiting? Is it wider than Ohio State's advantage in recruiting versus Michigan?
I think it's pretty. I think it's pretty close because Alabama. I just I just started some research for a video I'm going to do, and I jotted down Alabama's. I wanted to look at the talent of all the teams, every team in college football, from the time that the first college football playoff season. So I had to go back to 2011 because those rosters were stacked going back to 2011. And Alabama had all number one rankings except for like a 5 and a 2. So they've had by far the best all the way through the decade. And Auburn, too. I'll pull it right now. Keep talking, David.
Okay. What I'm saying is, okay, you just said that Michigan averaged between 8 and 12 in the recruiting rankings, Mark. Okay?
Yeah, off the top of my head.
Okay. So we'll say Jim Harbaugh has been the coach at Michigan for 5 years, well, going on 6 years now.
Yes.
2015 through 2020.
Yep.
So if he's been the coach at Michigan for 6 years, his average recruiting rankings, if you averaged it out over 6 years, would probably rank somewhere around 9 or 10 is what we're going to say.
Yeah.
Gus Malzahn has been at Auburn from 2013 to 2020.
Yep.
What do you think do you think his recruiting rankings average out to be higher or lower?
I've got him right in front of me because I've done all the research that I need to do on the SEC. I can't compare the Big Ten, though. Okay, so Auburn since 2013, 10, 6, 8, 9, 9, 12, 11, 7. They've averaged an 8.8.
Okay.
Alabama, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 5, 1, 2.
Right. Right. And I can tell you where Ohio State ranks, Mark. We average about top 3
Yep.
in recruiting.
Sure.
Okay. Because I think Georgia might be the only program other than Alabama that recruits higher than us. So if we're at 3, where's Michigan at in average recruiting rankings? Maybe 10, 11?
Sure. The gap's about the same, almost to a T.
But you understand the comparison I'm trying to make?
I understand the point you're making, but the thing that I hear from a lot of people, maybe not necessarily you, is that Jim Harbaugh is losing like all the time. Like he's losing to the elites, but he's also losing games he shouldn't lose. Well, then he's got to be winning. If he's winning 72 or 3% of his games, he's got to be beating somebody. What he's been doing is he's been losing to all the teams that are better than him, and he's been beating, up until this season, all the teams that are worse than his team. That's what he's been consistently doing this entire time.
Okay. Well, I mean, the point that I'm making is that I think that the recruiting rankings sometimes bear it out and sometimes don't bear it out. Because even with a recruiting disadvantage, you can sometimes stumble into a win or two. That's
well, sure, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line comparison that I'm making.
Oh,
and again, I think that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I've said many times here, it is baffling that Michigan has lost to Ohio State the way they have. But let's also understand that they haven't lost to Ohio State by 4 scores for 8 years in a row. They've lost to Ohio State by 4 scores the last 2 years. The 2017 game was very competitive. The 2016 game, they outplayed Ohio State, and you can argue that one back and forth. Bottom line, they lost the game, but the two teams on the field were very comparable, if not Michigan better.
Sure.
The 2015 team, they played a great team. They played a great roster in Ohio State. Of course, they got their doors blown off. So he's been routed 3 times, and he's lost 2 close games and won an excruciatingly close game. So this like 60-30 type loss has been 2 years. Like people talk about it like it's been going on for 10 years. He's lost to Ohio State like this twice.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. I mean, 2 of the games he's had have been competitive, and 3 of them have been blowouts. Yeah, you're right. Basically, bottom line. I tell you what, the 17 game, if JT Barrett doesn't get hurt, we might not have won that game, to be honest with you. We were kind of fortunate Haskins. We were fortunate Haskins came in and saved the day in that game, to be fair on that.
Exactly.
One. So,
yep.
Yeah.
All right, David, I'm going to take some more of these calls. I appreciate it.